I have been using the Reencle composter for a full year now, and it is time for me to update my review and tell you guys how I actually feel about it now that I have spent so much time working it into my daily routine. So just in case you missed my original review, this is not like most of the other composters on the market. It is not basically a grinder dehydrator. It is in fact using real microbes to break down all the food scraps into something that I call a pre-compost. And if you do want to learn more about that, I do recommend that you go check out my earlier video because we get into the science, we get to look at it under a microscope. It is really cool. So I'm going to start by talking about what I like about it, and then I will get into the things that I do not like about it that I didn't realize I was not going to like about it. So the first thing that I really like about it is this is still using the same microbial culture that I had when I started using it. Unlike other products where they are kind of asking you to add a microbial tablet for every batch, this is a continuous culture. It is always proliferating and growing inside of there, and you take some of it out and then you leave some behind to continue proliferating, right? And I have not needed a new microbial culture the whole time I have had it. It is built to be that way, but you know, sometimes accidents happen, sometimes we abandon it and it dies because it does need to be taken care of a little bit. But I will say, even with some of my neglect, it has pulled through and I have never needed a new microbial culture. And that brings me into a major question that I got in the last review that I didn't think to address, which is you guys were asking me whether or not you can leave this alone when you go on vacation, because like I said, it does have to be taken care of. And Reencle actually provides a guide for how to prepare if you are going to leave on vacation. But I will tell you this, I have followed that guide sometimes and sometimes I don't. And it has always been fine. Now, I've never left it alone for more than a week at a time, but it's pretty sturdy. You know, you don't have to worry too much about it. And if you're going to be gone for a while, as long as you follow the instructions that come with it, you will be absolutely fine. Another one of my favorite things about it that has not stopped working at all is the motion sensor lid. This is still one of the most convenient things about it, and it still works perfectly, exactly as good as it did on day one. Something else really interesting, and I think probably positive that I noticed, is on here there's a button that says purify, and that's supposed to be when it starts to smell and you want it to smell a little bit better. And the thing about that is, even with all of the stuff that I have put in it, like the moldy bacon, the gone bad milk, I have not stopped doing stuff like that. I have, if anything, pushed it harder than that. And I've never once needed the purify button. And I'm still on the same filter that I got when I got it with this. It came with two, and I'm still on the first one, even after a year, and there's still no smell, which kind of blows my mind. Like it's got to start smelling at some point, right? Because the carbon filter in the back is not infinite. It will eventually need to be replaced, but it's doing a really good job. I was really prepared for that to be the reason that it failed. I felt like the fact that it could eat up all that nasty stuff that I was putting in there was too good to be true. And so far it has actually just been true. I also really like how quiet it is. We have been sitting here next to it being on the whole time, and it's a gentle humming in the background. You know, with all the other electronics that we have going in our houses, it really just blends into the background noise, and if I wasn't sitting directly next to it, I wouldn't hear it at all. Okay, now I want to get into the things that I do not like about it that I was not expecting to not like about it. So first of all, in addition to the list of things that comes with it that you shouldn't put in it, such as bones or fruit pits, things like that, which make total sense given the nature of the mechanism and how those items are very, very hard and would not be able to crunch through as it's being turned. In addition to that, I have found that you cannot put very fibrous things in here. So the biggest offender is a banana peel. The fibers that run along the length of a banana actually don't break down at the same rate as the rest of the banana peel. And so this thing would break down the majority of it, and then those fibers would be left over and they would start to get spun around the rotating arms in there. and I have had it kind of bind up a couple of times, and I had to go in and kind of cut them off of there. And so as long as you cut your banana peels up before you put them in, it can still take them. But I wish that that was something that they would have mentioned or tested for in the original list of things. And something else that is maybe more just a simple annoyance than an actual issue that I have is you do actually have to put in the work to chop up some stuff to be able to put it in here. So if you guys follow my channel at all, you know I'm quite a lazy gardener, and I do try to cut corners wherever I can. And so chopping up some of my vegetable scraps before I put them in here is not like top of my list of things that feels important. But some things that are a little bit stiffer, like a broccoli stem, for instance, if I don't cut it up enough before I put it in here, it will actually get caught between the little spinner arm and the wall, and I will hear a little bit of a squeak as it goes around. The first time I heard that, I was like, what is that noise? And it's not something that causes an actual problem. It is just a little bit of a funny noise for a while, and then it breaks down and goes away. But I have had to actually think about putting in the work to cut up some of those tougher food scraps enough so that they don't get caught and cause some of those funny squeaks. And then the last thing that I didn't expect to have a problem with, but I kind of do, is the size. And this is probably just a me problem, and it might not be a you problem, but I am, even as a single person living alone, I do cook a lot more than the average person. I cook maybe 3 or 4 times a week. And I also, in the middle of summer, am processing massive amounts of produce. And that means that a lot of food scraps end up in here very regularly. And I have found myself a little bit annoyed with how often I have to clean this out. It's about every couple of weeks that I have to shovel half of the stuff in here out and go put it outside. And if I'm being honest, that's actually not really that bad, but if I didn't have to do it as often, I think that that would be better. And because of that, I am actually going to be transitioning away from this one, and I'm going to be moving up to the new model that Reencle offers. It's called the Gravity. And if you're interested in seeing me review that one, that will be its own separate video where I will talk about it, and I will also link it down below once it is available. But if you live in a smaller space where you can't actually have something that's bigger than this is already like, you know, small trash can sized. If you don't have space for anything bigger, then this will work, and maybe you're not as impatient as me and you won't be annoyed by having to clean it out every couple of weeks. And especially if you are not creating as many food scraps as me, you will probably have to clean it out even less than that. So overall, I actually really, really like it. It is surprising to me how much I like it. Like, the biggest surprise to me is the fact that a year later, I'm actually still here using it. As a gardener, I've gone through a bunch of different ways to compost my food scraps, from traditional composting to vermicomposting with worms to bokashi composting. And this is the thing that I reach for the most. It is honestly the most convenient composting I've ever done. It takes the least maintenance and it works really, really well. So in that way, I think this is probably something, like, I'm moving up to the bigger version of this, but this company is a company and a product that I am really going to be using every single day, probably for the next 5-10 years. Like, I really find it hard to envision something that will be good enough to replace the spot in my routine that this has filled. So if you came here trying to figure out if this is worth the money, even after I've had it for a year, the answer is a resounding yes. I really do think it is worth it. And so if you decide that this is also for you and you would like to buy your own, I do have an affiliate link down below. I like to think of it as a little tip that you are going to leave me for taking the time to review this for an entire year so that I can help you make a good decision. And if you want to see whether or not you should get this one or the bigger one, then stay tuned for that review. And when it is posted, I will link it up here on the screen and also down in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy gardening.